Katrina? No? Yes?
I
No,
can
we can't hear
hear.
you.
Oh, we hear you.
Oh, you can?
Okay.
Okay. So, you guys can hear Katrina?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
How come I can't hear Katrina?
Can
Try
you
to
hear
say something
me?
again. Yeah, okay, good. I was just talking over you. I should be quiet. That's the lesson. Good. So I'm really excited to bring this group together and to welcome back Bridget and Megan, who have both returned from volunteering abroad with us, and they're going to tell you guys about what they were doing. And to also welcome Katrina and Gabby, two of our distinguished alums, to share their experience as well. And so what I want to do is, to get this started, I'd like to just have each one of you introduce yourselves and say where it is that you volunteered and what it is that you did while you were there, and then share what it is that you're doing right now. And I guess that's for Katrina and for Gabby, and for Bridget and Megan, if you guys, instead of saying, say what you did and where you did it, but also say one thing that you missed or that you're missing about your home away from home. Bridget, do you want to go first? We can just go right down the line.
Yeah, I can go first. So I'm Bridget. I just got back from a semester in Morocco. So I was a student at Al Akhawain University for January to May, like mid-May. And so I was a student at the university as well as a teacher at the Azra Center for Development. So I was teaching English about 6 times a week to different level classes. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm home now. I guess kind of what I've been missing about Morocco is
Wait 1 sec. Megan, would you mind muting? And then when you're ready to talk, would you unmute? Because I think we're flipping back and forth from the sound. Great, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. So one thing I miss. Well, I definitely miss all my friends there. I miss kind of like the work day that I used to have, where I would get there, have a ride with Mr. Mehdi, who would drive me from the university down. That was literally a lot of fun because we were always, I don't know, he was so much fun. Like, as silly as it was, he was always fun in the car. We were always singing songs. Then I just kind of miss that community that I had at the center, because then for lunch I would always eat with people in the staff, or like if they all went out for lunch, sometimes they would take me, sometimes they wouldn't. It was just such a nice center, like, where everybody I worked with, the woman who cooked our lunch, like, we were becoming good friends at the end. I was sad to leave. I think that's something I miss the most, kind of just having that community and kind of being separated from it, but knowing that there are other people there now doing that and that I'm not with them. So I guess that's where I'll start.
Very good. Maybe we should have Megan, maybe we should have you go next, since you're one of our two returnees, then we'll go to Gabby and Katrina.
Yeah, so I'm Megan. I was in Aceh, Indonesia for about the past month. I'm home now, but I was there from about like May 7th to June 4th, I think I got back. So in Aceh, I was living at a Muslim boarding school called the Sukma Bangsa School. So at the school, I was working in some of the classrooms, teaching English to students and serving as like a conversation tool for the teachers and helping the teachers work on pronunciation with the students and help the students master English. So I also was able to do a lot of extracurricular things with the students because the junior high school and senior high school students lived at the school, so I spent a lot of time with them and other teachers who were living at the school as well. So yeah, so that's some of the things that I did, and I guess things that I'm missing is mainly just the people. Like Bridget was saying, it's difficult to know that everything's going on as normal, and you're not there to participate in the activities as you once did. And I think I'm missing too, like just the conversations that I had. I felt like every single day I had such like a valuable conversation, was learning so much, and it's difficult to be home and not always having those conversations and thinking in the same way that I was there.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Gabby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Gabby. I volunteered in Tajikistan 2014 for 1 month in Dushanbe. And there I was teaching at the Tajik State University of Commerce. The first half of the day was teaching English to students, and then the second half I was working with like kind of the administrative staff, working on the university website. And something that I miss most about the experience, I think it was going into work every day knowing that I would learn something new, because it was my first time being out of the country, and it was a very fresh and new experience for me, so it was like exciting for the whole month to just know that I would go in learning something new.
Hey, tell everybody what you're doing now.
Oh, right now I'm in Israel. I've been here for 10 months and I leave in about 2 weeks, so I was just studying abroad here for a year and took language classes and art classes and philosophy classes, religion classes, so yeah.
This is so awesome. I mean,
Thank you.
I just think about like trying to get your passport. Like it's 2 days
Yeah.
before you left for Tajikistan, and
Right.
the experience that you had, and that you just spent a year studying abroad in Israel.
Right. It's honestly all just in credit to what I experienced through AUA. Not even like trying to boast the program or anything like that. It's entirely due to what I experienced and learned through it.
So, am I right that you have been out of the country twice now, and once was to Tajikistan and once was to Israel?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, like that's just that's like the poster for going big or going home. Good for you.
Right. Thank you so much.
Good. Katrina, how are you? Go for it.
Hi. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Katrina. I was a 2015 volunteer in Stone Town in Zanzibar. I worked at the Forum for African Women Educationalists, which is a female empowerment NGO, mostly as a communication intern, although I kind of, filled with other roles to be filled there. Let's see, what do I miss most? It's going to sound repetitive, but probably the same thing that most of you have been talking about, just the community and getting to, kind of be a part of the community and learn about it at the same time. And I'm actually looking forward to going back to the community. I leave on the 4th of July to go back to Zanzibar for 9 months, volunteering with Art in Tanzania, which is another NGO. So.
Which is also amazing. So I had asked Fiona to join too, and she sent you guys an email, which I had forwarded to you. And I mentioned that because Fiona had volunteered in Zanzibar the year before Katrina did. And so we've had 9 people in the last 3 years that we've sent to Zanzibar, and 5 of them, including Katrina and Fiona, have gone back there because of just the experiences that they've had, which is also, I don't know, listening to you guys introduce yourselves and talk about what you miss, I think if you haven't come to terms with this yet, in terms of, because this whole webinar or discussion is about bringing this experience back and engaging with other people about it and sharing it in productive ways. And sadly, I'm going to say that there's going to be 2 levels, at least 2 levels of this engagement. There's going to be a level that the 4 of you are able to speak with each other about and that you'll understand. And as you're talking about things like missing the people, the feeling of community, that I've just been introduced to this amazing place, and now I know what's happening in this amazing place, and it's still happening, and I'm not there anymore, and I'm sad about that. Like, those are things that you guys can talk about with each other and that you'll understand. And then people that have not had these experiences and not been challenged by them, and I think that's in part, Gabby and Katrina, why you guys have done this next step in terms of this kind of overseas travel, or about to do it because of the challenge, and being able to meet the challenge and wanting to do that again. So the folks that have not had this experience, it's really important not to shut them out because they can't connect with that first basket of emotions that you guys have running through you from these experiences. And it's really important to think about how you can share these experiences in ways that are non-threatening and non-dismissive, because we want to create stakeholders and encourage other people to do these kinds of things. So, and then there's a whole other basket of people that just aren't going to be interested at all. And that, as Fiona wrote in her email, it's really good to have an elevator pitch, because they want to express interest, but they really actually don't want to know that much about it. So if you give them an elevator pitch, then they'll at least feel better that they asked about it, and they'll feel, there'll be some connection on it, but they're not going to want to sit and talk for a lengthy period of time about what you actually did. So I want to start this off by asking Bridget and Megan to just think for a minute about that second group of people, not your fellow alumni here, but that second group of people, and because that's going to be the more difficult challenge, not for you guys to have a great conversation, the four of you, but what is it that you truly want to communicate about the people at the Azru Center that you met, or the people at Sukma Bangsa, or the life that you lived there that is relatable to those that haven't had this experience? Like, what is that message that you want to articulate? Who'd like to go first? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Bridget, okay.
I guess I can go first and just kind of think about it. In terms of, I don't know if I'm ready to go. I guess kind of the things I want to communicate back are, one is just kind of about the Azru Center as itself. A lot of people kind of get that idea as an international volunteer, you went and did all this work and stuff, but I also want to communicate that I was just a part of it, that there was this whole thriving center that was doing so much amazing work, and that I was just a small piece of it, but it didn't rely on me in any kind of way. So kind of to take out that whole idea of oh, what you did was so good because you went over there and gave so much to them. I also want people to realize how much they gave back to me, and how much I needed the experience. Even though I would like to hope that I helped my students by teaching English, I want people to know how much the center helped me grow, and just career-wise, confidence-wise, and just figuring out so much about myself. That really, and most of that I feel didn't hit me until I came back here, because insane as it was for those past 4 months and very, very busy, I didn't really have a moment to take and let it sink in. But now that it has, and you're kind of having these conversations and realizing wow, I am completely different, and it's because of the people I met there and how much they taught me. So that would be definitely one thing I would want to communicate out. And also just kind of Azru is a very, very rural community, and I think a lot of people, even the people I went to school with who were also studying abroad with me, have this idea that the students there were there because they couldn't get an education. That wasn't the situation. They were there because they had huge dreams. They had all these plans just like any other student in the U.S. That all of my students had these really, really interesting ideas, and they were learning English and going through the center because of it, because they wanted to do that, because they had their own ambitions. And those are the kinds of things, it's not, I want to tell people, you can have all these ideas about these rural communities, especially in a Muslim world, for instance. A lot of people have their ideas about how women are portrayed, but I had so many students who were women and felt, you know, they made their choices and they had so many dreams, and that's kind of what I want to get back, that, you know, we have these ideas, we have these images, especially when you watch the news. All they give you are the sad stories, but then there are these stories of ambition and, I mean, such intelligent young people who are going to do great things in the world, are going to do great things in their community, and that's kind of something I don't think we see a lot of, and that's something I really want to bring back. And hopefully and also feel like I had a part in it, because, for instance, one of my students was looking into having her resume edited for if she was going to leave, and I helped her work on a resume for English speakers, obviously, and that was kind of like the small pieces that people don't expect to hear, but that's kind of those were the biggest moments for me.
Good. Megan, go ahead, and then I'll make a comment.
I guess like my experience is very much, I guess, similar in a lot of ways, because Aceh is an extremely rural area also. So I think too, a lot of the time when you go on a big like volunteer trip like this, the perception of the community is that you did this great thing and that you went and saved the world kind of thing. And I very much like don't necessarily feel that way, just because this school is so, I believe, like advanced for Indonesia, especially in this rural area. I think I was prepared for a school that was kind of falling apart and students that weren't interested in learning. But then when I got there and was talking to all the teachers and the students, they so wanted to be a part of the larger global community. They really did know so much. And even like there were 2 students that I met that are actually coming to the United States next year for an exchange. So I'm really excited about that, in order to keep in touch with them and also kind of really understand what the difference like really is between their education and what they're going to experience in the United States. But I think the most important thing that I want to share with people is just the importance of being present and using like your presence and communication and compassion in order to bridge like cultural gaps. I think that I was nervous going there, not having like a lot of similarities with the people and going into a community that I very much like stood out. But I think that I realized as soon as I got there, as long as I was open-minded and willing to be with the people and talk with everyone and have great conversations, that I would easily make friends, and my experience would be really positive. So I think a lot of times people are afraid to make those connections, or are almost afraid to make the connections, I guess, because then it would challenge what they are thinking about the community. So I guess just encouraging people to keep an open mind and be present, and that like a lot of times what we hear is not the reality, and you can't start judging like a community based on perceptions that we hear in the media or that we read in the newspaper. Is something that I guess I would share, but I think that's maybe challenging, especially right now in the United States, to share with people who maybe aren't interested in engaging with communities abroad, but I think that that probably is one of the most important things.
So what I heard from both of you guys in different words is the message, and if we're thinking about an elevator, is that we're all human, and that's whether you were surprised by it or to what degree you were surprised by it, that your headline takeaway from the experience of being there is that we are actually all the same. You know, we've got differences, layering here, layering there. We have these aspirations for a better future, you know, in terms of working with people on resumes, or, you know, their language skills, or if they're going to be an exchange program. You know, Bridget's comment about how misconceptions about how women are treated, and reevaluating that is more perhaps we have in common than different. Megan's comment about being able to make friends if you take that cultural leap and go and get on the plane and go to these places, that we have this common ground. And so I encourage you, as you're thinking about like that elevator pitch or a message that you're going to give in a presentation, that maybe you start with that, and these are different points of evidence that you've just listed off. And I think that one of the most powerful points of evidence that both of you said, or at least Bridget, you said, and Megan, you were nodding along, is that you learned, that you benefited from this, that you didn't go to a place of woebegone people that were clueless, but rather that it was a mutual exchange, that we are human, and that everybody got something out of this, and perhaps you got more out of this than anything you were able to give back, which is almost 99% of the time the way people feel after these experiences. But the corollary to that is that you have no idea the little things that you did at this moment or that moment that it will have the biggest impact on somebody else. So the second part of this question is, like, that question was to get to what's your message. The second part of this question is to deal with a skeptical or a hostile audience or discussant in a conversation in terms of, okay, you went, you were a tourist, you played voluntourism, you got some great pictures for your Facebook page. What did you really do? And so I want to call you out on the impact of what you did, so that when someone less friendly is putting that question to you, that you're not thinking about it for the first time in terms of what is it that you think you had an impact on? Like, how is it that you think that your presence in one of these places made a difference in somebody's life and made it better?
Okay, I guess I can go first again.
Okay.
So I definitely thought about that a lot, like, kind of, just questioning myself and making sure everything I did was for, not for selfish reasons, and making sure, like, that I did take a lot out of my time there, and that the students that I had were taking something from me. So I definitely had the advantage that I got to live there for about 4 months, and I think that time period, I would question somebody to say, even if my biggest experience was just kind of explaining to people that, first, not all Americans assume that anybody who practices Islam is a terrorist. I think that was definitely a conversation that a lot of my students had, and we had those conversations, and we kind of talked about the stereotypes that they had about Americans, and that was definitely a piece of it, kind of saying, like, all right, but I definitely dispelled stereotypes that they had about us. It kind of opened up a cultural conversation with people who sadly don't, like, just like how we get bad media of the Islamic world, they're getting equal media of us, that they only see images that aren't very friendly. So I would think that. Also, I would definitely say I worked very, very hard in my classes to make sure that my students were doing well in English, and really trying to give them, like, a means to use English in the way that they were planning to have their career goals match. So one of my biggest projects at the end, because I had so long, was my students were broken into vocational training groups. So I had their, like, end projects had to be about their vocational training in English. So some of my students studied business, so the end of theirs was a business pitch, like, kind of making an elevator pitch for a business plan. And then I had a web design class, and we worked really hard about basically how would you build a website for, and the topic we did was tourism, but I was like, all right, so I would give them, like, a list of words and be like, which ones of these do you think are, like, buzzwords or, like, advertising words? And so I think, like, I definitely had the advantage of being there so long to get to know my students and kind of learn what they wanted from me very in the beginning, so that way we could hit those marks in May. So I definitely would like to think I had an impact there, and I think, but just other things, I think, once again, in between both of us, my students and I think we learned a lot from each other, especially in ways of, like, just, like, kind of human nature things, like confidence. Like, I had one student who was really very, very nervous to always present things, but at the end he was doing his presentations with everybody else, and we worked through that together. So even though that's not the reason I went, I wasn't a career coach or anything, I was there to teach English, I think we both grew together. And my students absolutely did the exact same for me. So I think that's kind of how I would address those questions, just kind of be like, I feel like I had an impact as a teacher, but I also had an impact just as a person in building this relationship. So I don't know if that kind of answers it well enough.
I think it's a great answer, because you also gave specific examples that if I was trying to challenge you on this, there's two things that are stuck in my head right now that you gave me as evidence to that question. Megan, what do you think?
I think that, I guess because my experience was shorter, sometimes I feel like that question might be more commonly addressed, I guess, to me. But I guess in my experience, what I would really focus on is just how much I learned while I was there. Like, yeah, I was working and yeah, I was giving back to the community, but I am like a completely changed person because of it. So it's not like I was going with this mindset that I'm going to change the world and change this community and only do this for myself so that I can feel proud that I did something out for a community. But I think for me, the greatest part of my experience was the mutual learning, like Bridget was talking about. I think that we don't realize that other countries have the stereotypes of Americans as well. And when we put out negative media about like Islam and the Muslim world, that's extremely hurtful, especially to countries where they then think that all Americans don't like them, or if their dream is to study English and go to the United States, all of their fears are, will I be accepted in the United States? Is that even a possible thing for me to consider? Because I'm constantly hearing all of these hateful messages. So especially for my students that are thinking about going to the United States or actually are going next year, it was, I think, really powerful for us to have that conversation and kind of present why some of those stereotypes exist and just talk through them and make sure that they know that yes, not all Americans are afraid of Islam or think negatively about Islam. So I think that for me it was the mutual learning and the conversations, and I was in the classroom a lot and working with students, but I kind of served, I guess, more to help the teachers. So that was kind of where I was actually working, as serving as a resource for teachers so that they could be more confident in the classroom. And I think too they increased my confidence as an educator because I essentially had to do whatever they asked of me, whether that be planning an activity for their classroom, even if I didn't know what the students were learning at the time, or leading the class in a game or a song, even if the students were at a very introductory English level, those kinds of things. But I think that, yeah, I learned far more than I gave, I think. And I mean, I've done like service work before, so I was kind of expecting that, but I think the stereotype is that people go to different places to volunteer just so that they can say they did it and feel good about themselves. But I definitely don't feel that way in the sense that I've learned so much just about the way that we interact with other human beings, and I think that that has been the biggest lesson for me.
Am I gonna say one more thing? Sorry. The one thing I was gonna say was like, I think it's also the fact that we're like having this conversation that proves that we're aware of this as an issue, and it means that we're addressing it and making sure, like, you know, maybe we're not always a perfect model. Like, everybody makes mistakes, because definitely I'm sure each one of us took a picture, like, while we were there and did something that maybe wasn't 100% correct, but the fact that we're, like, having these conversations and reflecting, and that's a whole part of the experience, I think says a lot. And I had one of the conversations when I was there, because people are obviously, somebody who's doubting might follow up, and one of the reasons I was talking with some friends, I said, you know, like somebody had mentioned, like, aren't you taking a job away from a community by being like willing to be teach for free? And then my friend Muhammad, who was quick to my defense, who I love for it, was like, no, you don't understand. This isn't something that we would like. He's like, it's that Bridget comes in. Otherwise, we don't have that teacher because we don't have the money to pay somebody, and like there isn't an English teacher in this area. So he's like, it's either you have a volunteer or the lesson isn't there. So, I mean, I was very grateful to Muhammad for, like, kind of being my buddy there and kind of getting my back, because he was a student at the university with me, and I was really, really happy because I don't think I had an answer that quickly, and he was, I don't know, he was just like, no, stop it. This is not a conversation that you wanted to hear. But anyway, I'm good now. Sorry.
No, and again, another specific point of evidence to refute what the argument is when someone from the community is saying that. To pick up on Megan's point, impact can run several different ways. I mean, there's impact from that human development perspective, but there's also impact from the citizen diplomacy perspective. And giving specific examples of how you changed people's opinion of America because you traveled 30 hours on several airplane flights to get to a village 2.5 hours away from the closest airport in order to be there for a month to work with people who very rarely have relationships with someone from the Western world, but who live in a terrible inferiority complex with people from white skin. I mean, I think that's a pretty good example. I want to flip it a little bit right now, though, and ask Gabby and Katrina to talk a little bit about this with the benefit of hindsight, of a couple years or a year in Katrina's case. And like, as you think back on your experiences in Zanzibar and Tajikistan, and you've heard Bridget and Megan talk about some of the people who they met and trying to filter what's the impact that they had. Can you guys take up one or both of those questions in terms of what do those people mean to you a couple years later who you met, and what is the work or service that you did? How does that, because we'll get to the impact it had on you personally, but the impact that you think it had externally on the people that you met.
I can start. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
No, I like doing these webinars because it always like brings back my memories and stuff. But yeah, I think about how every day we would have a lesson set, you know, because we had this work to do. You know, we were English teachers and we had schedules, but every single lesson, like me and my like teaching partner Noreen, we would always get off topic because we would just end up talking to the students about anything that we noticed we had a difference on. And it was like that human contact. I think it kind of follows what you guys were talking about having, like, you knew that you had your work to do. That's what you were there to do. That's what you were scheduled to do. But there's the whole environment surrounding it that has an impact on you. So as far as it being like a lasting impact, I mean, I still think back on it and I still apply the lessons that I learned being in a foreign community to how I interact not only with people here in Israel, but even back home, knowing that I have this knowledge as a base. So, yeah.
What about, Gabby, the people who you met while you were there? Not necessarily the other volunteers, but your Tajik hosts, and you know, like these relationships are so vivid for Megan and Bridget right now. Like, looking back on it from 2 years ago, I don't know if you're still even in touch with people from there, but like, how do you see those people and that experience?
I keep in touch with some of my students, and I mean, it's mutual in that, like, you know, I value what I learned from them, and then if they have any questions about like programs that they could potentially be a part of in the States, or like scholarship opportunities or anything like that, we definitely keep in touch with things like that. And one of my translator that I worked with in Tajikistan is actually studying in the States right now, which I thought was really cool because, I mean, I don't know, like, you want to look ahead and know that you'll keep in contact, but to actually see it happening and to know that they're doing things. One of my students, I know he's like doing, I think, I don't know what exactly, but he's part of like a model UN program in Russia right now. So yeah, like, we keep in touch over Facebook and stuff, and I remember them, and you know, we keep in contact sometimes. So yeah, the connection is still there with several of them.
I think that's really interesting and good, because of that feeling that both Bridget and Megan spoke to of, I'm here, but their community keeps on kicking, and they're doing these things, and I'm not involved in it. Mm-hmm. And it seems as if you come to a place where you find a different way of being involved, and you know, it might not be like that you're living together, but that you are all living together in a larger format, or still sharing the same space in some kind of way. Mm-hmm. Katrina, what about you? What do you think in terms of a year later, you're obviously going back. The impact of the work that you did while you were there, how's that held up for you? And you're going to see people who you came to know last summer. So maybe speak a little bit about that in terms of relationships with these people.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start with the first question about the impact of my work there. And I think I kind of agree with what Megan started out with. 6 weeks is admittedly a short amount of time to make a huge impact. But as Bridget was saying, the knowledge that we have of that, the awareness that we have of just, our goals going into the program, it's not to save the world, it's to, have an impact in terms of like cultural perceptions and breaking down stereotypes and that type of thing. I completely agree with everything both of you said about that. And that's probably been the biggest thing that has persisted even a year later. I still have conversations with people about my time in Zanzibar and why I'm going back. People always ask me why I would want to go back. And I'm like, why not? There are lots of reasons why I want to go back. And one of those is people, of course. I have stayed in touch with people pretty consistently throughout this year, which is something I didn't necessarily expect. I kind of came back home and had that goal of keeping up those connections, but I also had kind of a healthy knowledge that it would be difficult and it might fall off after a certain time, but it's a year later and it hasn't. So it is.
Are you still with us? Are any of you guys still with us? Okay. All right, so let's wait for Katrina to come back, and I think Gabby, I'll move on to the next part of the question, and I guess you'll go first on this one. And we started talking about this in your introduction, that can you put into a context for Bridget and Megan how this experience helped you to grow, and where you are in your dorm room in Israel right now versus where you were a few years ago? I think it might help them in terms of thinking about what they do next and what their interests might be or how they might evolve.
So like how we grew from the experience in general? Or
I'll give you a minute to think about it because Katrina's back now and we'll let her finish her thought. Sorry, Katrina, go ahead.
Sorry, at what point did I cut off? My screen just kind of froze.
You were just commenting on something Bridget had said and then you froze. I think you're muted.
Sorry,
Okay.
technology difficulty.
All right.
So as both Bridget and Megan had said, I think it's really important the awareness that AUA kind of cultivates and, the impact on both the personal level and the impact that you have on the community, that our goal isn't just to go and save the world in these places, to break down stereotypes and create kind of cultural bridges for people. So that's what has persisted with me. I think, I'm not sure if you heard me talk about the way that I've kept connections with people in Zanzibar for the past year, which has been a challenge, but also something that I feel is really important to keep up. And I've really drawn on those personal connections as I made my plans to go back to Zanzibar, because the people there are just so welcoming and helpful. And I was a little bit lost at the end of the semester as I tried to kind of make my plans for going there. I checked with a few different organizations and called on our in-country coordinator there and the people that I met there to kind of help me set my plans. And now everything is in place, and those people are looking forward to seeing me, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. And it's just a continuation of everything that happened last summer. So I think I answered your question.
Yeah, and so the next part of that, which leads directly into, I was just asking Gabby the question, was about your own personal growth from this experience. And I know Bridget and Megan both have other ideas in mind about going abroad again or doing things that build upon these experiences. And so, you've specifically chosen to go back to where you were before, and if you could maybe talk about that a little bit in terms of, because just as background, Katrina spent time studying abroad in China before this, and has really gotten interested in parts of Africa as a result of this experience, or as part of this experience. And for Gabby, who hadn't been abroad before, and then she decided to go and spend a year in Israel, I guess if you could talk just a little bit about ways that you were challenged by this experience, then being challenged when you come back to put it into some kind of context, and then making the decision that, oh, I'm going to go and do something like this again, or follow up on this in some kind of way. Like, if you could just talk about that process a little bit.
Sure. Sorry, my internet's being a little difficult right now. So you cut off with all that, but I think I understood the question. So yeah, I did abroad in China. I studied Chinese for many years now. I should be much more fluent than I am. So that was, for a long time, seemed like kind of the future path for me. I would study abroad in China, and then I would, spend more time in China and maybe work there, do something like that. And then when I went to Zanzibar, I kind of, chose this program out of, one, a connection with a roommate in college, and two, kind of just a desire to see something beyond the kind of, I guess, niche that I'd put myself into. And that really expanded everything, and kind of changed pretty much all of my life goals. So that was really, I guess, one of the, it was a challenge that I guess I wanted to repeat. It was a challenge that I wanted to deepen by going back for a longer time. Because every time I've studied abroad in China or Zanzibar or anywhere else, it's been, 6 weeks or so. And that's a nice length of time. It gives you time to, be more than a tourist in a place. You get to actually make personal connections and everything. But it also seems like as soon as you're comfortable, you have to leave. So I wanted to spend, closer to a year in a place and really, go past that 6-week marker, go past just, getting to know a place to actually being a part of a place, getting to know the deeper ways of living there. So that was one of, I think, with Zanzibar as well, was that this place had such an impact on me, and I don't feel like I'm done with it yet. So, yeah, I think that answers your question. Let me know if I left out any part there.
No, that was great. Gabby, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah. So as far as the challenges going into it, we would have our little webinar lesson things before departure, and I felt pretty ignorant compared to the other students because I didn't study international relations or political science or languages or anything like that. So I don't know, I was just kind of diving into it, and that was a bit scary, but I felt like there was something to learn from it, so you can't really be afraid from experiences that that you have potential to learn. And so then I was there for that month, and I knew that I was really like my same thing as what Katrina said, my life path just kind of went with this new knowledge, that you have to change and you have to build off of it in every way that you can. And I'm still doing that. I still look back on it, and I know that there's so much credit that I give to my experience just in me being here. So yeah, I still use it as an official building block, even having these webinars now. And I heard one of the girls mention art in Tanzania and NGO. So, I mean, there's always more to learn from it. And what else? Yeah, I think that's all I have.
Good. That's great. So the next aspect of this that I want to take up is sharing the experience. And I guess if I could ask, maybe we'll start with Gabby and Katrina, and then we'll come to Megan and Bridget. If you could talk about something that happened in terms of sharing the experience that really felt good and that was a really good interaction, and why you think that was the case? Or the flip side, a really bad interaction, and why you ended up having a really bad interaction about your experience? I think that that would be really useful, because I think that Bridget and Megan are just at the very beginning of trying to figure out how to have conversations about their experiences, and if they could hear from the two of you about something good or something bad. And I would add to the question that Gabby is this wonderful photographer and Katrina is this wonderful writer, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be a conversation that you had with someone, but that you shared images with someone, or you wrote something and you got some kind of response, positive or negative. I think that that would also be useful to a discussion.
I can jump in here if that's okay. So I'll start with the bad experience and then end with the good. Just recently, last semester, I took a travel writing class, which seems like it would be perfect. Then you mentioned that I like to write, especially about formative experiences like this one, and others that you get while traveling. So I kind of went into the class really excited about it, and expected to be writing a lot about Zanzibar. And I kind of found that the professor was looking for a certain kind of narrative that didn't really allow as much depth as I felt I needed to put into it to describe my time in Zanzibar. Like these are the top 10 things to see in Zanzibar, these are the top 3 beaches, or that kind of thing. And she would kind of ask me those questions, and I'd be like, well, yeah, the beaches are nice, but the people I met, and she wasn't really interested in hearing about that. So I guess that was one where I kind of felt like I was being pushed away from what I really needed to do when talking about Zanzibar. And it was hard because it was a whole semester class, so I was kind of fighting that the whole time. But I think I produced some pieces throughout that she may not have liked, but I did. So then the good experience, I guess Ben has heard this one before, but I just want to keep going back to, it was right after I got back from Zanzibar. It was the first presentation I did, and I'm from a very small farm town with, let's see, there's one Baptist church and there's one Lutheran church, and we have a historical society in town that keeps records of where the post office has been for the last 100 years. So they actually requested a presentation, I think because my grandma's in the historical society, and that's how they heard it. But they thought, well, Zanzibar, that's a cool place. Let's have her talk about that. And it was like, 10 80-year-olds, all of whom are very involved in the Lutheran Church. None of
So I'll jump in while we get Katrina back, and say that that point about the travel writing class is a fantastic point, because just because your audience is not into what it is that you're saying, you have a challenge to figure out what your target audience wants to hear about, and we've talked about that ad nauseum individually and as a group, but don't let it impact how you see your experience just because you're getting that sort of negative feedback on it. Gabby, what about you? And then we're going to go to Bridget and Megan.
So a bad experience that I recall, it was, I think I've actually mentioned it in a webinar before, but it was as soon as I got back, and I kind of kept it from my family that I was leaving until like the last week. I was like, yeah, so I'm gonna go to like this country for a month. So then I got back, and it was just kind of like, I had all these new ideas and like a little bit of culture shock and new knowledge and stuff in my head, and I didn't really know how to digest it yet. So my family, they're like deep down supportive, but at the same time kind of making fun of me a little bit, because I just kind of like disappeared. They didn't know anything about it, and so it was hard for me to for them to know like, okay, this is our daughter, she went and did this, and this was the impact, and like, all lined up and structured. So that was a little bit rough, and they don't really have an interest in travel or anything like that. So it's just kind of like a difference that we still have. But then a good experience was while I was preparing to go to Tajikistan and I was in school in San Francisco, my dorm roommate, she was there just kind of witnessing me like running around trying to get my passport, trying to like get my life together and everything. And but it actually made her interested in what I was doing, so I would talk to her about it. And after I got back, I referenced a couple of NGOs that I had heard of prior to AUA and afterward when I came back when I was more interested in it, and she ended up doing volunteer work through one of the ones that I applied to. And it was just cool to be able to like, you know, like her see me, I guess, in some way as a role model, and then she went and did it, and now we can share this experience and compare the new things that we learned. So that was really
cool. That's a good story. I hadn't heard that one before, and I don't think I knew that you were going to Tajikistan from your family either. And Katrina, what I said while you were gone was that your example about the travel writing was perfect, because on one hand you need to know your target audience and what it is that they're interested in, and on the other hand, when your target audience is not interested in what you have to say, you can't let them dilute down what your experience was and have it impact how you see your experience, just picking and choosing what it is about that experience that you're going to share with them. So Bridget and Megan, you guys are so fresh in terms of having these conversations. Why don't you share with us what's been a challenge thus far, or what you've seen be successful thus far in terms of your interactions?
I can go, yes. So I guess something that's been successful for me is I was able to keep a blog while I was there, because during my first week I kind of was overwhelmed because I was so busy and constantly doing things, and I felt like I was learning so much but wasn't really taking the time for myself to process it and share it. So for me, even while I was in Indonesia, I was already sharing my experience, and I got a lot of like positive feedback from my family and friends. Even people like in the Indonesian Aceh community were sharing it to their friends, and for them it was really sort of like something they were proud of, that people in the United States were commenting on my blog and that other people were hearing about Aceh and it wasn't just me, and I was sharing it to my friends. So that was something that was really cool to see. And I think just a challenge, probably for, I guess, all of you right now, is just like what's going on in our country. It's been like a challenge to come back to and kind of like hear the media again, and talk to people who don't necessarily have like an open mind right now, or just willing to give in to some of the things that are being blasted in the media. So I think that a challenge in the next year is going to be how do I kind of let my emotions and my not kind of take away from what I learned, because I think right now, since I'm coming off the program so soon, the emotions are still very tied to my experience, and I think that that's the hard part of trying to have a conversation with people who maybe think negatively about Islam and the Muslim world. So I think that moving forward in the next year, finding ways to kind of set the emotions aside and use like logic and reason as well, but also finding a way to work the emotions in too, because I think the most important part of what I learned is more about like the human dignity aspect and compassion and the fact that we're all human and we all are the same in many ways. But I think also using some of the logic and reason, I think, is going to be something I'm going to try to do as well.
Those are good points. Bridget, do you want to add in before I make a comment?
I guess, yeah, I can say my answer to the question. The good parts have been definitely that everybody's been very receptive. I mean, a lot of my friends and family did ask questions, but were very, very kindly, because a lot of people were wondering, oh, did you have to wear a headscarf ever, or hijab? And I said, no, like, this is this. So a lot of people that I've had conversation with, they've asked their questions very respectfully and just been like, I thought this was the case, and then been receptive to what I had to say. Couple of the struggles I've been having is because I went as study abroad in the traditional sense of the 4 months, is kind of even the conversations that I was having while I was there. one of the issues that I felt I was having was, first I had a friend who had been to Morocco. She had studied abroad in Italy and then kind of did like a study tour on social justice in Morocco. And they had done this tour, and she'd call me and be like, "Oh yeah, it's so beautiful, I love it." And then she'd have all these different ideas, and I'd just be like, "I understand, but seeing Casablanca to Chefchaouen is not what Morocco is," and just kind of feeling like I had this whole different experience. And then the other thing is kind of trying to get that idea that I didn't country hop like people do on study abroad, but that I was a piece of this community, and trying to explain to people how much more of an impact I had, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, do you regret not going to Europe and seeing Prague and then seeing London?" And I'm like, no, I don't regret it. Yeah, it was different, but I think, I don't know, I have never done the European study abroad kind of thing, so I don't know, but I don't want people to think that my experience was any less because I spent all of my time in Ifran and Azra, Morocco. I think it was so much more because, and so much more, especially from the other students. I was the only AUA semester student, so I had all these friends who were just there from their universities and were there for 4 months, and I was like, and a lot of them felt like they were having trouble getting exposed to the country because they were struggling joining clubs on campus that they felt they fit in with, or like they were having trouble making Moroccan friends. But I never had that issue. One, I had Azru Center where I met all these people, so constantly I was spending the weekends in Azru with friends there, and that was kind of one of the conversations I kept really, really struggling with there, because there was a couple of people who they only saw that study abroad, like going, all right, we're going to Tangier, we're only going to Casablanca, we're going to Fez, and they had all these ideas, and I was like, I don't know. It was really, really big struggle for me because they were like, oh, well, this is what I learned in my class, and I was like, did you ask a Moroccan about this? Like, and I felt like that was something I got so much more out of by being a part of the community that a lot of other people didn't have, and that's kind of been something I really want to get across, that even though I was a tourist, I wasn't the experience that everybody else was having. I was this strange situation where I was a teacher, and sure enough, the other girl who came over just as a regular, like just as a study abroad student from her school, she ended up volunteering with me and was of the means and had the time that she's still there and she's staying for another semester. And I'm just kind of trying to explain to people that how enriching it was to be there. I think that's something very, very special about this program. I think sure enough, the fact that so many of the alum are already out there again and want to go back is an example of that. So that's something I've been kind of struggling to like get across, is that experience, because people want to see the pictures and they want to hear about Fez, they want to hear about Casablanca because of the movie and things like that. But I just am trying to explain how deeper this experience was has been my biggest struggle. But I do have to say, even though there are people who obviously have their ideas about Islam, most of my conversations have been incredibly respectful, and most people have been very, very, like, just kind of, they're honest. They're like, I have this stereotype in my head. Don't all women, are they all forced to wear a hijab? And I'm like, no, half of my friends did not. Like, my roommate did, and that kind of thing. So most people I've had those kinds of conversations with have been great, and things like that have been absolutely amazing, and kind of especially giving Morocco its own identity outside of the Middle East as people think of it, because everybody just thinks, oh, Morocco and Jordan, they must be next to each other, and I think that's been the best experience, kind of being like, no, Morocco and Jordan are completely different, and here's why. And then kind of getting rid of that idea that we can just take this whole region and identify it as one identity. So that's been probably my best experience so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great insights and comments. And I'm going to come back to what I said at the very beginning, is as you think about the different groups of people who you're going to interact with. And, you know, if you fall back on the patience that you guys have had to have when you came to a new country and you're trying to get to know the people there and you're trying to figure out how to interact in the most appropriate way, and you're using so much of your listening and observing skills to figure out where to fit in and how to say this or how to do that. And as you're having these conversations in your hometowns, on your campuses, or with strangers at the airport, you've got to polish and bring out those same listening skills and analytical skills, and develop those empathy skills to really look at who you're speaking with and where you can take the conversation. And if they are having strong Islamophobic tendencies, it doesn't mean to shut down the conversation, but to ask yourself the question, why do they feel that way? Why do they feel threatened? And what can I say or do that doesn't make them feel more threatened and feel as if they're wrong, but that pulls out a piece of evidence that they can relate to that might make them adjust how they're thinking about it. Might not. And that you can't have those same conversations that the four of you might have with each other with that person that you're having a casual conversation with at the airport. And that takes an incredible amount of self-restraint and confidence to realize that you don't have to say the same thing and make the same message to every person. Bridget, your point is so well taken about you gained more from spending your weekend in the community where you were living and working than you did from going and seeing a different city and being a tourist in that city. And that knowledge and that understanding and self-awareness of that makes it a stronger experience for you. And it's not something that you're going to have to communicate to everybody else. And just knowing that for yourself, it's almost like if you had a journal, you wrote it down in the journal, and you understand it. Like you said it here in front of all of us, and you understand. You said it to me last week when we talked as well. And so that's just so important in terms of how you'll feel about your experience. And that's why I brought out the example of Katrina in the writing class. That okay, so the teacher wants you to write greatest hits for Let's Go to Zanzibar, but if you turn that into your type of travel writing, then you're losing out. Like just maybe you do that for that class, but you shouldn't dumb down what it is you have to share, because that's what the audience is for that class. And Gabby, your connection with your roommate, I mean, you found something there that you guys had in common. Like you tapped into like that aspect with NGOs and volunteering was something that was shareable between the two of you, or a bridge between the two of you, and you fixed on that. So let's just end it with, I give each of you guys a last word, and the last word I would like for Katrina and Gabby to speak to is, if you had one piece of advice for Megan and Bridget as they're just coming back, and Gabby, you're going to be in a world of hurt in about a month when you come back from this year-long experience, so we might have to do one of these for you to process your year, but what's the advice that you would give to these two about re-entry? And then Megan, Bridget, we'll give you a last word as well. So but Katrina and Gabby, why don't you guys go ahead?
I can start. It's different for every person when you try to make sense of the experience that you've just been through. For me, it helps if I just put it into a story. So I know when I got back, I spent a lot of time just like writing down things that I remembered happening, and that kind of helped me to pick out those stories that then became parts of presentations, or it also becomes just things I remember better because I took the time to kind of put it into a narrative, and you do lose those experiences after a while. There are things that I didn't write down that I don't remember anymore, and I wish I did. So whatever your mode is of storytelling, if you like have a blog or a diary or a video journal or songwriter, whatever you do, I guess I would just say to like use that to kind of help to put your experience into a story that you can then both remember for yourself and share with others.
Good.
Okay, so what would I want to know if I was like returning from Tajikistan that I didn't know before? I agree with the writing aspect. That was like so key, and I didn't really keep up with it after I came back, even though ideas and new perspectives were setting in even after I returned. So definitely writing helped. And don't take the opportunities where you're maybe pressured to sweep your experience under the rug. Like the issue that I had with my family, I was kind of like, all right, maybe we just won't talk about this. Maybe you guys are just like welcome me back in the house and then that'll be it. But every opportunity that you have to talk about it, let it out, because there's more potential in this experience than meets the eye.
Good. Very good. Okay, Megan, Bridget, is there a final comment that you have for this, or thoughts that you didn't get to share that you want to share with us?
I don't think so. Oh, Megan, do you want to go first? Okay. Anyway, I don't think I have like much else. I mean, I'm very, very grateful for the experience and hope, like everybody else, I get to do it again. I don't really know where it'll take me. I don't know what life has planned for me right yet. Now, I could see myself going back to Morocco in January, if possible. But right now, I'm trying to apply for a program through my school to go to Ghana. But I kind of want to do my senior research on Moroccan irrigation systems, which nobody ever would have realized. Well, I didn't realize until I was there and was like, oh my god, this is the most fascinating thing. So as boring as it sounds, it's actually very interesting. So I could see myself going back and hopefully doing some research on that. But we'll see. I don't know, because it's a crazy world out there.
Okay. Megan, what about you?
I guess similar thing. I don't know exactly where I'm going to be, but I think that this experience has been huge for me in terms of just opening my eyes to the importance of getting involved abroad. And also, too, I learned a lot about language, because in Aceh, people speak up to like 6 languages, depending on if you speak multiple regional languages, and then Arabic and English and Bahasa. So I've definitely been thinking more about enriching my skills like as a person to try to communicate with people in their native language rather than using English to communicate with people. So that's, if I was to go back to Indonesia, which hopefully I will be back to Indonesia, I guess a goal for myself is to increase my language skills so that I can communicate with the community in their native language.
Okay, so Katrina and Gabby, I really want to thank you for sharing your experiences with Megan and Bridget. I think that I see all of you guys and our program alumni as connected, and so it's really fun for me to see you actually connect with each other and talk about these experiences. And particularly in the case of Megan and Bridget, I hope that you guys, this is an introduction. I hope that you guys all have each other's emails and other ways to communicate with each other. But we have a LinkedIn group that people join, and there's Facebook page and other things. But there's people out there to have these conversations with at all of these different levels. And so, Gabby and Katrina, thank you for sharing your experience with these guys. And Bridget and Megan, I've said it to both of you guys individually that we've talked about the hero factor, and you can go there to change the world or do this or do that. But I think it's incredibly commendable in terms of, for the 4 of you, but you two most recently, in terms of the time that you devote to trying to do something with people who you don't know in another place, and to change the way people think here, people who you care about, people who you don't know. And when we do these things that are bigger than ourselves, it's a really positive thing. And I'm glad that you guys each did your own programs with us, and that you have this unofficial ambassador aspect as a building block for whatever it is that you guys will do next. And so obviously we have individual things to be in touch with each other about going forward from this, but just don't lose sight of that group aspect of this as well, and that there's a whole group of people, and you just met a couple of them today, that have had similar experiences and have similar interests, and that when you feel as if, why can't I have a decent conversation and nobody understands me about what it is I just went through, there's countless people that either officially unofficial ambassadors or others that are having these experiences and doing them, and so you shouldn't feel isolated in that way. So I'm sorry that we ran over on time a little bit, but this is a great conversation, and I really enjoyed seeing all of you and speaking with you. Thank you. That's it. Okay, so guys, just be in touch.
And they can upload one of the things. They don't, I mean, everything like that.